I think that we are all in. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Getting Recruiters Point of View. I'm Margie Cherry, the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services at the Gateway Career Center here at Lafayette. Doesn't it look like I'm actually here at Lafayette? And yet I'm not. So we're super excited today to start talking to our wonderful recruiters. But before we do that, I just wanted to do, let you know about a few housekeeping tips. Number one, you are all on mute, and that's just so that we can eliminate the background noise, make sure we can all hear our fabulous recruiters. The other thing is when we start to talk, you may want to take yourself off camera. That way we can keep the focus on the speakers. And if you click speaker view in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, that should take you to having yourself off screen, and that will be great. And then the speakers will be highlighted. That'll be terrific. I want to let you know that we will be addressing everybody's questions, but we're going to have you enter your questions in the chat bar, and you can enter them as you go along. We're going to stop at around 1:10 with our interviewing, and then we'll start addressing questions. So we'll have plenty of time to ask questions. Just put them in the chat bar, and then we'll reference that later. Just so you know, this will be recorded so that you can access it later, and anybody who wasn't able to make the call can access it later. So that will be there for you. So let's get started. I'm super excited today. I really can't wait to talk to our three fabulous alumni recruiters, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, but then I'm going to let them really give you their background so you get to hear right from them all about where they came from, what year they were, what their major was, all those exciting things. So let's start with Taneesha Tate-Robinson. Taneesha, class of 13, she recruits for Chemonics International, which is an international development firm. And then we have the wonderful Laura Hammer, who is class of 2012, and she recruits for Google. And then last but not least, we have the wonderful Lindsay Yang, who is, oh my gosh, what class are you? Are you 13?
14.
14, I'll let you tell everybody. I knew it was like 12, 13, 14. And Lindsay recruits for Levi Strauss. And if you don't know what Levi Strauss is, just look down at your legs. I'm sure you're wearing Levi's right now. So let's get started. I want them to share their years of experience about recruiting. And don't forget, just put your questions in the chat bar and we will get to those in just a moment. So without further ado, I'd love to have first Taneesha, then Laura, and then Lindsay introduce themselves, talk a little bit about your background here at Lafayette, how you got into recruiting, and what you recruit for right now. So Taneesha, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. As Margie said, I am the class of 2013. My major was international affairs, and I was a Posse scholar at Lafayette. And so I recruit, like Margie said, at Chemonics International, and they are an international development firm, which means that I hire people who do contracts for USAID, and we also have a division in the UK. And so we recruit we do projects in the UK, sort of their version of USAID. And how I got into recruiting was I was actually interested in international development work. And I first started out in an office in USAID. And so I thought the easiest way to get into a company is to go through HR. And so I got hired as a recruiter from a previous job. And then I decided, however, that I actually really liked HR. So I just decided to sort of stay in the development sector, but do HR instead of doing development work. Oh, and then,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Margie.
No, go ahead, finish.
Oh, and then, so I recruit from entry level to senior level, so associates, early career to director level.
Can you give us a little bit of an idea what kind of roles they are? Like what would an typical entry level role be?
So an entry level role as an associate role would be people who do sort of liaise with our field offices, do a lot of paperwork. And then our manager level, they sort of do all of the project management day-to-day running of the program via the home office. They coordinate with the field office, and then the director level is sort of that high level who is working with they're called chief of parties. So those are the people who are in charge of the entire project in country. And so they sort of set the strategy for the project, problem shoot, liaise with the like director level at USAID regarding the project and things like that.
Right, right, great. And can you tell us like a typical project, that the kind of thing that you might be working on?
Sure. So actually, currently, I am working to staff a project in Iraq. So 7-hour time difference for me. And I would normally be in country doing this, but because of COVID, I have to do it remotely, which is a bit challenging. So with that, I am staffing the entire project from like finance assistants to our sort of senior level advisors. And so that just involves, posting posting the position internationally, doing interviews, onboarding, that kind of thing.
Right, gotcha. So typically, if things were normal now, you would be doing a lot more traveling, huh?
Yeah, so I sort of do, I wear multiple hats because I'm a talent manager at Chemonics, so I sort of manage a cadre of special advisors for our peace, stability, and transition section. I also recruit for proposals, so when we are sort of bidding for a new project, we have to get staff. So that can be from like the US to any other country that we have offices in. And then this special project is called a billable assignment, where you sort of work for the project and you recruit for the staff. So those are the
Great.
stats up there.
Fabulous, thank you. I have to tell you all that this just blows me away to hear Taneesha talking about this, because Taneesha worked in the Career Services Office when she was a student. So now to hear about her grown-up life. This is wonderful. Thank you, Taneesha. All right, Laura, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hard to follow after Taneesha's internationally. That's pretty cool. I'm Laura Hammer. I graduated in 2012. Majored in anthropology, sociology with a minor in English. I sort of was a happy accident just landing into recruiting. I started recruiting about 7 years ago on like the fashion retail side on the agency. So worked with a lot of like higher end women's contemporary brands. And then eventually upon my move to San Francisco, I started doing corporate recruiting at Sephora corporate. So overseeing their merchandising as well as some of like their real estate and HR recruitment there. And then the last almost 2 years, my 2-year anniversary will be this November at Google. And then I started with them predominantly focusing on real estate for their real estate and workplace services team. So essentially building out a pipeline and hiring real estate account executives, as we would call them. So folks who build out our offices nationally, which is pretty cool. And then from there, recently in the last like 8+ months, I've transitioned to hiring admins or administrative business partners, as we call them here for Google. So predominantly, I would say folks maybe with like 2 to 10+ years of admin experience. So really kind of ranging in some more green to more tenured talent who have supported C-suite executives. And that's what I'm doing now.
All right, fabulous, fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Terrific. All right, Lindsay Yang, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, great. Well, I'm so happy to be speaking with these two, and I think we have some pretty diverse experience. So I started actually recruiting with a bank on Wall Street, and it was a lot of undergraduate recruitment for their internship programs as well as MBA programs. Getting to that position was also somewhat of a happy accident. At Lafayette, I majored in psychology and art. So I had this really innate interest in people and connecting people. And I think I went to the Career Center and they connected me with somebody who was in HR at a similar company to the one I started with. And so
you didn't even pay her to say that. You didn't even pay anybody to say that.
And so that was really interesting to me. And I was pretty lucky to have found an opportunity where I got exposed to recruiting at sort of an earlier stage. From there, I really wanted a more creative environment, channeling that art side of my background, and went over to Urban Outfitters, where I was recruiting a lot of entry-level positions that we consider creative positions. So the folks that are designing the product, that are buying the product, that are developing the product. So really hands-on with that creative process. I also leveraged my network and talked to Laura, ironically. We talked a lot about what it's like to be in that industry, where she sees other opportunity. As I spent almost 4 years there, I was feeling like it's ready to take a move. Levi's fell into my lap somehow. We talked extensively because she was in San Francisco. I was considering making that move. And here we are almost 2 years later to this month. I've been with Levi's, started out with the creative functions again, but now am focused a lot on our executive recruitment. So anywhere really above a director level, all the way to a chief level. And so I've just launched off from the level as well as the size of the business. And it's been about 6 years now.
Wow, fabulous. And you just brought up a point that I actually wanted to ask all of you. How many of you have gotten, if not this particular position, one of your recent positions through networking?
I think 2 out of, I would say 2 out of my 4 jobs I've had since I've graduated have gotten through networking. My first, where I started my career post-grad, which is weird to say, at a modeling agency in New York, working as like a junior agent / assistant. And I got that through a girl in my sorority. I was a member of Kappa Kappa Gamma, and her sister was looking for an assistant. And so I interviewed through her. And then
Perfect.
one of my old colleagues that's not Lafayette affiliated from my old recruitment agency started to work at Google. And then her and I had dinner, and then she referred me. So most of it has been through referral and or someone I've known.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. How about Lindsay or Taneesha? Networking, or did you go through the front door of following a posting and applying?
Taneesha, do you want to go?
I'll go. Mine will be very short. So I didn't get any of my positions through networking. All of mine were applying and being persistent, except for my current position, which I've been in for about 1.5 years, that actually fell into my lap because a recruiter contacted me on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And asked me if I was interested. So
awesome, terrific. Okay, Lindsay, how about you?
I think like Laura, probably 2 out of the 4 have been through networking. The first job I failed to mention before was completely different. I was working part-time at a gallery in New York because, again, I had that art background, and my professor, along with his alumni connections, helped me get my foot in the door there. It was not fulfilling enough for me, so that's when I started to explore and talk to either alumni or other folks in this type of industry. And then with Urban Outfitters, I also had a fair amount of connections there, so I leveraged my network, but that was also sort of a let me apply and see what happens. So I think it was a combination, but I think you can't go wrong networking. It really is important, and that's a good skill to have.
Terrific. Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to hear the variety of ways that people find their jobs, because we always tout networking, but yeah, just like Taneesha said, sometimes you actually just apply to something and through persistence you get it. So there's so many different ways you can break in. But coming from you guys, from the recruiters, what part does networking play with a recruiter? Because are people networking directly with you, or is it you're getting internal referrals? How much of your hiring is done through those internal referrals, through the networking piece, and how many are coming in, I call it over the transom, people applying?
Probably. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, at least from my time and I'll be speaking more from like the Google perspective, from the real estate side, which was much more siloed because often the roles were quite niche, with being more of a background in general contract, architect design, and interior design.
Gotcha.
That was pretty referral heavy just because of like the industry and people knowing each other, and again, it being a quite siloed sort of like skill set. I would say the admin arena now that I recruit for is much more balanced, and like people externally applying as well as like some referrals that come through. I definitely think we treat referrals with like a white glove service, if you will. Try and be like mindful of like the value in which it comes from another Googler. But just because the referral doesn't mean we're always gonna like have the bandwidth to talk to them, or they might fit the skill set required. But it's been a much more diverse mix of like how we've garnered talent, at least in the admin side of things. So it might be industry contingent.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's interesting if I look at it from both ends of working with entry-level roles to now more select and niche skill sets. At an entry-level role, there's an influx of applicants. So that's when networking and really leveraging any type of referral helps, because the pool is so large. So it really does help to get a foot in the door. And then on the flip side, when you are in a more niche environment, there's a lot more to work with in terms of referrals. So there might be only one person who does something, and that person is connected to somebody that we know. So it really does work to have that type of network at a higher level. So it really depends, but I think those are the instances where I've seen the referral process and networking help a lot more. But I think Laura hit the nail on the head there. You do tend to treat referrals with that like white glove experience, because they are coming from somebody who's already been vetted by the company.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Now it's funny, I noticed when I was looking at the registration page, we have a lot of undergrads on today's call, as well as a lot of very new grads. Our 2020s are brand newly minted graduates. So considering the crazy environment we find ourselves in today with COVID, do you have anything specific? Has anything changed for you in the recruiting process? Either, for new grads reaching out for those, those first jobs, do you have any specific information for them to share, given the situation, or are things pretty much the same as far as applying and getting your foot in the door?
So for my industry, I think that things have pretty much stayed the same. I think the only difference would be that there may not be sort of as many jobs out there just because of the circumstance. But for me, I work sort of in in an international industry, so a lot of our communications are already through Zoom or Teams or Skype, just because of the nature of our business. So I think for me it's been pretty much the same.
Okay, so for somebody trying to break into this, they would still just go through the regular channels. Nothing different. Okay.
I do agree to kind of plus one to what she shared, in the sense that just to kind of give you broader, at least numerics that were recently shared with us in one of our town halls, Google's hired over 15,000 people since the start of the new year, which has been pretty awesome. We currently have 120,000 employees working remotely globally. So what's great is we're still hiring, we're still interviewing, we're still onboarding. It was just definitely a bit of like a cluster when in March we did a total 180 of being in the office, and typically for our orientations we onboard 200 to 300 people minimum in person, getting their laptops and registered, their benefits, everything. So have to kind of do that 180 within a 24-hour period. And I think we onboarded about 3,000 people in March.
Oh my gosh.
So it was pretty crazy. And unfortunately, it did not provide a good candidate experience. People didn't get their laptops for weeks. There were issues having to onboard remotely. So to echo that point, there definitely has been a bit of a slowdown in role opportunity, in the sense the volume definitely isn't as high as it probably would normally be. But I think taking into mind the candidate and client experience, the fact that people are working remotely with their families, maybe they don't have childcare support. So being mindful of everyone's bandwidth, as it is a domino effect.
Good point.
Because if you had double the work, we had double the jobs, which could change as I guess we get more acclimated into this new norm. Can affect other people who might not have the bandwidth to take on double the amount of the allotted work, and because of them watching their kids or whatever it is. And then in tandem, causing maybe a domino effect of other poor experiences down the line. So we're definitely seeing a lower volume, I think, right now, just to get, like I said, acclimated to the new norm, but we are still hiring. It's just definitely going to be at a slower volume. And I always err on the side of caution with candidates that the reality is it's going to be a bit slower given the brevity of the situation, and that people have ever shifting priorities on both sides. So.
Right. That's good for an applicant to keep in mind, that if someone's not getting back to them, they're, like you said, they're probably juggling a million different things on the home front as well as their job. So that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zing, you have something to add to that too?
I would just say, for my industry, there's quite the contrast. It sounds like both companies, Laura and Taneesha spoke about, they're taking off, they're still able to operate. We've experienced quite a hit to our sales. Retail is just over across the board, not doing well. It's a tough market, but we're optimistic. I think folks want to get out shopping. I know personally, I can't wait to get back and start shopping again and start spending money, but it's a nice reset right now, right? So we have seen it really impact our business, and I don't know if anyone's seen in the news, but our company did publicly say we had to reduce our staff by about 15% globally, which when you're in 110 countries and you are a global company with over 14,000 employees, that's a very large number. So that's really hard for us. So the thing I would say is companies are, and outside of retail, this might be happening as well, they're going to look to be more agile. They're going to look to streamline and really just think about how they can operate with either reduced force or just in better ways to accommodate the changing landscape and the changing environment we face right now. So it could pose a lot of just challenges, but it hasn't slowed down the business and what everyone is looking to do. So there is hope.
Great. Fabulous. Well, I'm glad you ended on the note of hope. That's very hopeful, because I know retail, that sector has been so hard hit. That and hospitality are really the toughest right now. But we're all hoping that it does come back. So with that in mind, when things come back to normal, let's talk a little bit about, just in general, how to be a standout candidate. And I know in conversations with all of you before our talk today, we talked about, the importance of your documents, your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn profile, things like that. So what particular advice do you have for ways to stand out with your documents, be it a resume, a cover letter, and some of you I know don't even require a cover letter anymore, and your LinkedIn profile? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I can kick it off. I think LinkedIn, I'll start first. I think having it to be relatively up to date and having keywords of whatever maybe you're aspiring to do in your next step in your trajectory. Because if we are doing searches, we're likely going to be referring to in part some key opportunities, for example, with I don't know, admin, calendar management, because often when recruiters are doing searches on the back end, we call Boolean strings, which is often we're looking for candidates that might have gone to a certain school or might have certain years of experience or that might have a certain title in a job search. So they're almost
what was it you said? Something string?
Called a Boolean string.
Okay.
It's early here in San Francisco, sorry. So we often strategically do that to try to filter out maybe resumes that aren't applicable. So if I'm looking for admin assistants, I'll probably have various titles in my search that are going to be applicable to that type of job search. So I think having, I said, your profile being up to date with some key buzzwords or highlighting key responsibilities for whatever you're looking to pursue is important.
Right. How do you suggest that people find those particular keywords? What's your best advice on that?
Yeah, I'm sure people have some dream companies they want to work for. So I would say maybe looking on those websites, and if they have a similar job posting that you're looking to pursue, kind of peruse through the job description and highlight maybe anything that may have a synergy or that you could apply to your own in summary to add to your profile or to your resume for that matter.
Right.
You don't need to copy and paste, but if you want to adapt it a little bit to be a little more authentically true to yourself, I think that's honestly super helpful. And I've done that before because one of my jobs, when I applied to Sephora, I applied over LinkedIn, and I was definitely looking at job descriptions online from different companies of what maybe a full cycle recruiter did at a corporate organization, since it was my first time pursuing a corporate role. So that's something that I did and I found to be personally helpful when updating my resume on my LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Lindsay?
I think also for LinkedIn, one thing that is super helpful is also to put open for opportunities on your LinkedIn, because you're more likely to get, if you meet the description, you're more likely to get a message if they think that you would actually be interested in the job. That's how I got the job at Chemonics. I wasn't even interested in leaving my job at USAID. I just always have that on there because you never know what could happen. and then
So
something happened. So.
Fabulous. Are you saying that you had that like in your headline, or where did you have that? Or did you just click the Open Opportunities app on LinkedIn?
So on LinkedIn, in your profile, you can put open to opportunities, and the only people that can see it are recruiters if they have recruiter LinkedIn. So when you're
toggling,
doing it,
like hitting a toggle that says open to opportunities.
Yes, but only recruiters can see it. So in the back end, when we're searching for candidates, let's say it's admin, like Laura said, all the people with admin experience will come up, and then some names will say open for opportunity if they put that they are sort of open to finding a new job. And then those are the people that, those are people that I normally pick because they're most likely going to give me an answer or contact me back. So definitely open for opportunities. And as for resumes, for me, I have like a simple resume that you can easily sort of like follow through and just sort of scan. One thing that I suggest is doing bullet points instead of paragraphs. No recruiter wants to read a paragraph. Just going to tell you the truth. It's really important to sort of highlight like your skills and then your accomplishments at your job. And just make it simple and easy. It's sort of like when I'm reviewing resumes, sometimes I have to review like over 150. And so it's a lot easier for me to sort of like skim, look at your job description, look at your job title. If it makes sense, read your few bullet points, and then, continue to go down that way. So that's just one suggestion. Simple and bullet points are very helpful.
Terrific. That's really good information to have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one thing too, especially I'm tailoring this to the undergrads, if you feel like your experience doesn't, let's say, align with the experience that the job is asking for, what I find really helpful when you're listing out any type of job is to find the most paralleled responsibility you've had. So if you think about maybe being an admin or in some type of coordinator role, a lot of that role is customer service. So say you worked at a store or you worked at a coffee shop, highlight the most customer service type responsibilities you've had at the top. Don't just list out the most basic things you did, because we can talk about that in conversation. But if you're able to really make your resume talk further about why you were such a great asset to that company and how that's going to translate to this role, that really saves a lot of time and space on your resume.
Wow, that's really good information. What do you think about having a qualifications section bulleted at the top where you mentioned those transferable skills, even for a higher level or mid-level person who has transferable skills, but they're doing a career transition, say, into a different role or industry, having a qualifications section, do you think that would help to make it easier for a recruiter to see?
I personally don't really care for those types of sections, to be honest, especially if you already have if you're quite a tenured person and your resume is already probably pushing over 1 to 2 pages. Sometimes if they're too long, and I've often seen ones that are too long, that can just take up half the page. And I'm just scrolling. And often, like Taneesha said, you only have so much time to review each resume. So I think if you do have it, it's probably most important to have a thoughtful objective or any of those transferable qualities listed. More or less, I think if you are going to be transitioning in potential industries, I think that makes a lot of sense. But if you're applying for an admin role and you've been an admin for 20 years, I don't need to know what your qualifications are, because that should be inherent in your job with the bullet points. So I think you can have, but I think it should be short. And it should be really concise and to the point.
Right. Gotcha.
My personal opinion.
That's great. Thank you. And, I think a lot of people are worried or concerned about ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems, and making sure their resume, and I don't know if the cover letters go through that too, but making sure all their documentation is ATS friendly. And if you don't know what that is, that's the automated systems that companies now use. I mean, I'm not talking to the recruiters, I'm talking to the people on the call, use these automated systems to kind of pre-screen applicants depending on what information they have on their resume. So how do you deal with that? What are you looking for, or what do you suggest to people to make theirs as ATS friendly as possible?
One thing that I suggest is submitting your resume as a PDF. because if you use a Word document or something else, the format can be off and can look sort of strange in the like when we review your resume, and it can also
Right.
like sometimes have like translate into symbols. It can just be very strange. So PDF is
Right.
definitely the way to go.
Yeah,
Right.
I totally agree with you. And I think too, when you go to an ATS or applicant tracking system, say you're applying online and it asks you to upload your resume, and that it will splice it from there. Don't rely on it to do it correctly. So really go through and manually enter everything, because that's where you could miss key information such as years or even the company name. I've seen so many applicants' profiles not even say the company name or their title because they spliced the information and it didn't upload correctly.
Wow, that's also really, really good to know. And that brings to mind, a lot of people have very beautiful graphic resumes with columns and colors. What do you think about that?
She's
shaking her head now.
Do you want to go, Lindsay?
I was going to say, because I am in a creative industry and I've seen so many creative profiles, it actually works in favor. Depending on, of course, on personal taste. Some hiring managers like it, some don't, but it does really get to show a little bit of personal flair. Although it can get really busy. Don't use high contrast colors. Make sure your font is printable and viewable in comparison to either the background. Don't make your picture the whole point of the resume kind of thing. But I think if it's done in a tasteful way and you really know your audience, that's what is most important.
So for creative, that makes a lot of sense. Does it get through the ATS system though when it's all graphic?
It will, but again, that's where the splicing is so important. I think if you upload a PDF, you're completely safe, but make sure when you are filling out every single box that you have to, you're putting the information in manually.
To fill it out by hand. Yeah, gotcha. So go ahead.
So for my industry, I am a fan of simpler resumes, and I think maybe like a graphic or two is fine. But I think that sometimes, because we're not in a creative industry, it's like very like super type A human beings, and so the simpler is better. So simpler is better and less graphics. I think sometimes, depending on how they're done, it can be distracting.
Right. So it really depends on the industry. That makes a lot of sense.
So.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking of too is, what are the things that you can do really to stand out with the resume? Are you looking, from the recruiter's point of view, are you looking for industry experience over maybe transferable skills coming from another kind of role over personality or fit? How do you weigh that? I mean, this is after you've interviewed somebody and you've seen their resume, you've spoken with them. Is there one thing that rises to the top that people should really keep in mind when they're talking with the recruiter? Is it that fit, rightness of fit, personality, or is it more the skills, experience, or is it just potential? You can see potential.
I think it's all the above. I think it's probably very much contingent to what you're hiring for, because often, at least for the admin side of things, we hire from all walks of life with like all kinds of backgrounds and like years of experience. So I've talked to straight up like executive assistants. I've talked to former events coordinators. I've talked to, recruiting coordinators. So it runs a gamut. That said, this might broach into like another topic of like what not to do. But I've had candidates who I've called and they didn't know what like the Google call was for, even though we were emailing like a few days prior. So it's just like being prepared and like knowing who you're talking to and like what job you're interviewing for, considering I was very clear in the previous email. And that happened to someone who was a very tenured executive assistant at JP Morgan. And on paper, I was like, okay, this will be great. And then it was not. And then also ensuring that, you have a clear train of thought, that like you're being, I think, authentically yourself, but then also like, I'm not looking for people who are being overly verbose. I'm looking for people who can get to the point, like I said, can be thoughtfully prepared with, like Q&A for me too. So I think on paper, for me and like what I currently recruit for, it's probably synergy with the work and what I base off the resume. But then once I talk to them, it's more so that energy, how prepared are you? We have an attribute that we call at Google called googliness, which is just like, are you a collaborative thinker? Can you be a part of like an innovative, fast-paced environment that has like a lot of ambiguity and that's like really big? And so leveraging your strengths and things like that, and being a good problem solver and navigating complexity and like all those key buzzwords, right? But it's getting that energy from someone. And obviously I'm a one-person conversation. I'll go through other rounds of interviews for more formal role-related knowledge assessment. But for me, it's kind of just acting as that gatekeeper to say, do you have the potential to be a contributor to our culture and be a culture add? So personally, I think it's all the above, but I think it really depends on what you're hiring for, because Taneesha might be, you know, looking for more of a specific skill set given her industry.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. I think for me, or for my industry, when I'm recruiting for Chemonics, I think the most important thing to have is the technical experience, just because of sort of what we do, and we have to answer to a client. And then after the technical experience, I think sort of is it the right fit? Because the people who we're hiring are going to be working with a wide variety of people from different cultures, different walks of life. And so actually I would say, you know, technical and sort of like, are you a right fit? Because of sort of the type of work that we do and who we interact with are equally as important. Because you can't have someone who's very technically savvy, but someone who is condescending or patronizing to our staff members. So I think both of those are equally important in my industry.
Great, terrific. All right, Lindsay, did you want to weigh in here too?
I think they both said it so well. It's a combination of a lot.
Right.
And the technicality thing is a big thing to consider. So really just know what you're applying for.
Right. Well, I suppose it starts with skills on paper, but then when you move to the interview phase, it's more about fit. All right. So before I ask you any more questions, I just want to jump in and say, please continue to put your questions in the chat bar. We're going to wrap up in a few minutes with my part of the question and answer. I'm going to turn it over to all of you and get your questions. There aren't a lot in there now, so if you're holding back a question, put it in the chat bar, and in just a few moments we're going to turn to your questions. And then when we're done, when we get through enough of your Q&As, I want to come back to our panel and ask them to leave us with a few tips, either things, do's or don'ts, you know, 3 final tips that they can share with us about being a standout candidate from the recruiter's point of view. So I think, you know, I just had one more question that I wanted to ask you all before we break to the Q&A, and that is, what about follow-up? Because I think a lot of people kind of forget that part. They submit their application, maybe they had an interview, and then they sit back and wait, and that's it, and they never follow up. What is your feeling about follow-up? How much, you know, when should they do it? How much should they do it? Should they do it? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think follow-up is really important, but I also think you need to be mindful of how many times and the frequency in which you reach out to your recruiter potentially. I personally can't stand it when people call me out of the blue, because often my days are back to back. And if I'm picking up a call and they're just, you know, wanted to check in, that's a really nice touch, and I appreciate that. But I'm not always at my my desk to take a call, or I'm often in back-to-back calls on another call and I see a call is incoming. So I function a lot over email, but I also function as a very like fast replier. I like to over communicate, and I try to get back to people within a timely manner. But again, being mindful that in this day and age that people are going to probably have shifting priorities, like working from home. I currently am in a childless household, so I'm just taking care of myself versus other people and other recruiters might have their own kids. They have to prioritize. So that's one thing. 2, I think definitely email is preference for myself. And then send a thank you note within a 24 to 48 hour period. Often I've had hiring managers say, oh, this person didn't send me a thank you note, I'm going to like put them on the back burner because of their lack of follow through or thoughtfulness or whatever it is.
Right. So that actually does happen. Yeah, Lindsay, well, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, I've heard the same thing where, you know, especially in this environment where you can't really thank, or, you know, there's less of that face-to-face interaction. A great way to show interest is to follow up with the folks you do interview with. When it comes to the
Right.
recruiter, there's a lot of work that has to go on the back end in order to get you that final answer. And it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, it could take up to a month. So patience is a virtue. But I would just say communicate as openly as you can, especially if you are interviewing at multiple places. You know, your recruiter doesn't want to be blindsided by you withdrawing from the process. So have that openness and just listen to what they're saying to you. And in most cases, your recruiter's a good person and will not forget about you, but they might not have the answers when you want them. So I love follow-up. I think it's great. It's an awesome reminder, especially if you're, as Laura said, on calls back to back. So it is a good way to nudge. But again, you can't expect an answer typically within a day or sometimes within the week. There's a lot that has to go into it.
Gotcha.
I'd like to add one thing.
Yeah.
So one thing about follow-up also is that one thing to ask after your interview is sort of when do you expect, when should I expect to hear back from you? And I would follow up with a thank you note like Laura and Lindsay said, but I wouldn't contact the recruiter until after the deadline of when they were supposed to follow up with you passed. Because, you know, in the interview, they said, this is when I'm going to contact you. If you do it before, you're just too eager, and recruiters don't like that.
Yeah.
That is good to know. And is an email thank you okay?
Yes,
Absolutely.
That's probably the only way to go, honestly. No one really checks their mail like that, I don't think.
All right. Well, I see we do have a lot of questions now in the chat bar, so thank you guys for a wonderful interview. We're going to come back to you in a moment, but first I want to open this up to the chat bar for these questions. So let me go. Somebody asked about putting personal information on your resume. We know you need your name, you need your phone number. Do you still put an address on your resume? Do you expect that? Is that a pro or con?
I think if you just put your primary city of wherever you're located. I know when I was applying for my role at Sephora, I was actually spending half my time in New York and half my time here. I was traveling back and forth for personal reasons. So I didn't have like, my real address was in New York and my permanent address was not here. So I just put San Francisco, California, because I was like in the process of moving. But I just think as long as you have your location, because I don't think recruiters also want to get catfish in the sense that, like, if you don't put your location and they're hiring for a job in a specific market and you apply, and if I'm hiring for San Francisco, but you live in New York and the team that I'm hiring for doesn't want to relocate because it's not in budget, it's, I think, being transparent. Obviously now we're working remotely, but we're still hiring against job locations for our job requisitions. So I would rather have a sense of where you're currently located, just to be mindful of like my bandwidth and my time, and if this opportunity may even make sense for you to have a conversation with me. So down the line, I'm not wasting our time or the team's time by not knowing just initial facts like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You could even put.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was going to say, I know when I was moving to San Francisco, I put, I'm in Philadelphia, but in parentheses, open to relocation. That's such a simple way to get that out of the way, because that's a conversation we typically have if we are going to talk with people from out of state.
Did you say on your cover letter or on your resume?
On your resume. You just, put your email address, phone number, primary city, and then either open to relocation if you want to, or if you don't, just be honest with where you are.
All right, terrific. Here's an interesting question. Can you talk about do's and don'ts for networking? Let's start with the don'ts. What shouldn't you do, as far as networking is concerned?
So one of the things that happens a lot, and I get a lot of requests that are sort of a request that I can't get out of. And what I mean by that is I will get somebody to network with me who I may not know or have any connection with, and they'll demand time to speak and then follow up to demand that again. I don't think that's a very approachable way. I think if you want to network with someone, you have to be sort of open and just know that you're technically cold calling in a way. So just be respectful and understand that you're reaching out and you're doing your best to connect. And this is, again, if you're just cold calling and connecting with recruiters. But if you have like a real Lafayette connection, I haven't come across anyone from Lafayette who doesn't want to connect with me and when I do it. So I think you have a great network to work with. But again, be mindful of the level of person you're reaching out to. If it's the CEO, make sure you have a really pragmatic approach to connecting with them rather than just, hey, I'm really interested in the company. I'd love to talk. You know, it has to be a little bit more specific.
Yes. Yes. I was
Fantastic.
going to say, I get reach out all the time from people who are like, I want to pick your brain about Google. But
Too overwhelming.
well, one, Google's huge. Like, I recruit for a very like specific arena, and I'm always happy to chat about like the broader culture, but the general process is probably consistent, but each recruiting function has their own approach when it comes to recruiting. So having almost too broad of a mindset and like thinking like, oh, she's going to walk me through how to like become like a engineer at Google. I have no visibility into technical recruitment, so I have no idea what they do. So I think understanding that most companies are probably going to be pretty big and you're not going to have insight to all these arenas. Also too, on what Lindsay was saying, most of my notes are just saying, I want to pick your brain. Okay, about what? Be to the point, be strategic, like be concise. And also lastly, don't expect that the person will likely meet you in person, especially these days. But even if you just email me your questions over like an email or LinkedIn or an email, I'm always happy to respond over email, even if I don't have the time or bandwidth for a phone call.
So a specific question is something that is easier to respond to.
Yeah, especially it'd be different, I think, if maybe you're more of a green like graduate. I know I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So saying like pick your brain, I'm a recent college grad, makes more sense. But if you're a tenured person with 10 plus years of experience and you're asking me that, like, again, being strategic into your approach, I think is really important.
Gotcha. Thank you. How about you, Taneesha?
One thing that I would say is also like if you're applying for a job, don't like and you see that the recruiter is the one who like posted or whatever, don't like try to connect with them on LinkedIn because they don't know you. And and I think that and to me, I feel like it's a bit of a turnoff. LinkedIn is supposed to be for people that you sort of know and have a connection with. But if you're just a random person who like applied for a job and then you want to connect with that recruiter, I think that's a bit of a turnoff to me. And another thing, like if let's say that you're connecting with an alum, don't ask for a job. I know that's very like basic, but don't ask for a job because that's normally not going to happen. I think that what you should be doing is sort of learning about the culture of the organization, showing your interest in the company, and then down the line, maybe this alumni will like, oh, I know this person. We've been chatting. They're interested in working here. Here's a position. Let me refer them. Versus asking for a job, because I think that's also a turnoff. So those are just my little tidbits.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I have several more questions here, so let me get to them quickly. The next one, if you have a person applying for a job and they don't have actual experience for that position, is there one thing that you could say to them, or they could say to you, that would really, make you say yes to them? What is a way to, in other words, what is a way to stand out when you don't have direct experience in a role, but you feel that you're qualified? Is there one thing that somebody could say or information they could provide that would really tip the scales? It's a general question.
Well, if you're having the conversation, I think you've made it far in the process, right? There's something about you that you've got to having that interview. So at that point, it really comes down to how the conversation went. And if you were able to sell yourself on the skills that you would bring to the table, I think that's all you can really do at that point.
Yeah. If you've made it that far, you can tell them your transferable skills, right? Okay. All right. The next question, and I'm just going to skip to the next questions. We have several in the queue. What are the best questions you've gotten at the end of an interview? Oh, that's a good one. When they say, when you say, do you have any questions for us? What are you looking for?
I think I'm looking for curiosity and I'm looking for passion. So if you're asking sort of a weightless question to me, then that's not very impressive. But if you really come up with something thoughtful and really flip it back on me, then that really proves to me that you've first off done your homework, you are thinking outside of the box, you're showing your curiosity, and you're also showing that you are interested and actually open to hearing about whatever my opinion is on something, rather than just getting through the interview and getting out of there and wondering when I'm gonna hear back.
Gotcha. Thank you. Taneesha and Laura?
Trying to think.
Yeah.
I haven't really had any good questions
That's okay.
asked me lately.
That's okay. So if they come to you later, you can chime in. So the next question is, how much information gathering about the hiring manager and their needs should you do with the recruiter? Interesting. So how much should somebody be asking you about the hiring manager and what their needs are?
I think you should definitely inquire as to like maybe their managerial style or what the team dynamic is like. That said, I would be also mindful of that the recruiter probably only knows the hiring manager and the team so well as just being like an extension of their needs. I know a lot of the times when I hire for the admins, I work with like administrative POCs who are helping me hire for the executives. The executives that I help hire for are not always my point of contact. So I might not know them as intimately well as I would potentially like the POC I'm working with. So maybe asking like, you know, who do you work with? Like, how well do you know the team? What's like the reporting structure like? Like, what is your relationship with them like? Because I think also as much as the recruiter is trying to sell you on the opportunity, they might be a little bit more forthcoming. Like you might need a little bit of a thicker skin to work in this type of like job environment or whatever it is. And it can allow them to, like Lindsay said, like you're kind of flipping the script onto them, asking them like, how well do they actually know their partners? Since often the recruiting structure will vary probably per team and per company and everything.
Gotcha. Thank you. Taneesha, did you have anything to add to that, or should we move on to the next one?
Well, one thing that I like to do when I, like personally, when I'm interviewing for a position is I like to stalk them on LinkedIn. I think that sort of helps, you know, like you sort of get to know them at least professionally. It worked out for me this one time. One of the hiring managers was an RA and I was an RA, and I sort of threw that into one of my answers to sort of connect, because, you know, like the RA skills were transferable in this specific position. So
right. Commonalities are great. Terrific. Okay, a couple more questions that are really good. What advice do you have for applicants who apply to a position they're qualified for but don't hear back from the company? Get that a lot, right? The silence at the other end. So when they don't hear back, what should they do?
Well, so I mean, I don't know if there's really anything that you can do, because there could be many reasons. One, you know, they've already gotten to their short list before they got to your to your resume. And also, you know, like when you have a lot of applicants, you know, not everyone is gonna get reviewed, at least for my company. And recruiters and companies in general don't really like it if you've not been selected for an interview. Contacting them isn't going to get you selected most of the time for an interview. The sort of the opportunity has passed. What I would suggest is maybe figuring out like how to connect with someone at the company, saying that you've applied for a position but you weren't selected, but you're interested in working there and you're interested in learning more about the company, so you sort of get that name recognition. So for the next time that you apply, because I don't necessarily think there's anything that you can do after, like, you know, you've already applied and you weren't selected with that position.
Okay, I see a lot of nods too coming from Lindsay and Laura. And just because we're running short on time, I'm going to go to the next question, which is there a right answer to the question about where else you're interviewing?
I never ask for specifics as to where someone's interviewing. I always ask, are there any sort of like timelines, whether it's like final rounds or offers pending, that we need to be aware of? Mostly because Google's interview process is notoriously long. And so just being mindful of someone's timeline, but I never ask where you're interviewing. it's kind of just like with compensation, like in the state of New York and California, it's illegal to ask how much someone is making. So, you know, I always ask for like expectations and just sort of like a general like landscape of where they're at, just so we're potentially not wasting their time in case they're expecting a final offer and we're just kicking off on our side. So I would just be transparent in the sense that I'm expecting an offer from a company soon, but if you want to be forthcoming, it's ultimately up to you. I know I never press on it unless we are approaching final stages and you have a competitive offer or a competing offer that we need to take into account. Then I need to know specifics in order for me to potentially expedite the process or to try to get you more money.
Wow. Okay. That's great. That's great to know. And that leads us to the last question, which I just want to get to before we have to wrap up, which is, if you receive an offer with a deadline to accept before another company's decision that you prefer, what should you do? So if you're waiting on your ideal offer from your ideal company, but you get another offer, how best to handle that? Good situation to be in.
I think email your recruiter, ask if you can talk on the phone, and explain the scenario. Say, like, Levi's is my first choice, but as you know, I'm actively searching right now and I did get a great offer. I wanted to let you know it expires this date. I just want to make sure you're aware of this. Is there anything that I should expect from you? Is there anything that I can help with as we move forward? Any additional conversations? I understand that you might not be ready, but I just want to share this with you. I think a phone call is such a great way to do it. It's hard to get that information over email and really hear the sentiment in your sharing this information. But you can always flip it back to the other company too and say you need more time to decide. There's no harm in asking that as well.
Right. Gotcha.
I also think just managing expectations, that just because you have an offer somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to necessarily expedite the interview process, because as much as you need to sell yourself, I think you also just sometimes need to be patient and knowing that, especially if you're early on in an interview search, maybe like the company is just looking to like vet out their first round candidates before making a decision on next steps. So I think it's good to be proactive. And like I said before, at that point, if you know you're going to be receiving an offer, that's when you probably should be a little bit more explicit. But if anything, like, just know that there are multiple things going on in the back end for us to probably push, since we are ultimately playing monkey in the middle to get
right.
So
right. Fantastic. So I'm gonna do something really mean to you. I'm gonna ask you each in 30 seconds or less, because we're running out of time, if there's one piece of advice or one thing that you want people to know. Let's do a lightning round, and you're on first, Laura, because you're in speaker view. 30 seconds. What is your top piece of advice you want to leave people with?
Always be mindful of the cultural elements or values that are important to you. I know that was a big thing for me because actually when I got my offer at Google, I just loved working at Sephora. So I wasn't ready to leave, but I took into like a longer term, I think, growth opportunity and valuation of just the monetary pieces, but also like the cultural of me knowing people who work there and have enjoyed it. So challenging myself and being mindful of what I'm really looking for. And also compensation. Like I said, we, in the markets, at least in New York and California, where I mostly hire, we cannot ask about compensation, but I always ask in the first call, like, have you thought about what you're targeting? So I think ultimately having like a baseline, either total comp value or base target in which you're potentially looking to earn. And if you're not comfortable like sharing that, you can always ask, like, you know, what is the range for this role that's been projected, or like, what is the overall like comp structure like? I don't like to waste time, so I always have these calls first thing and ask in my first call, but I know not everyone operates that way, but it's bottom line being prepared for that question. And that was over 30 seconds.
Okay, fantastic. Lindsay, how fast can you talk?
Okay, so I was gonna sort of echo what Laura said, but really just know what you're looking for. And you might be excited about a company name, but if you're not really excited about that job and you just want to be there, make sure that's the right reason you're choosing it. Do your research, but don't overdo it. You don't have to preach to your recruiter about how much you know about the company. You know, they work there and they think they know what they're working for. So be careful with how much oversharing of what you've looked up you're talking about. And then lastly is just practice. Really speak out loud. Find somebody you can talk to your mirror. Practice now on a video screen and really look at yourself and speak, and have ready stories to share. So have examples of how you are able to resolve conflict, ready to talk about that, ready to talk about adapting to new priorities, some of the questions you could maybe anticipate from the role. Sharing stories is a really great way to just show how you work and how you operate.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Taneesha.
One thing that I would always say is always negotiate. One thing, especially like for women, you know, as you know, women are paid less in general, and people of color also. So one thing that I always stress is always negotiate. And then when someone is asking you about your salary, always give a range. I like to do a $10,000 range. That way you sort of have some wiggle room, especially if they try to lowball you at the end. You can always negotiate for a little bit higher. And those are my two. I'm not gonna take away more time.
Fabulous. Mwah, beautiful. Taneesha, Lindsay, Laura, this was amazing. Thank you so much. You guys are a gold mine. You're a treasure chest of information. I wish we had 2 more hours to spend with you, but unfortunately we don't. But this was fantastic. I thank you so much. And I thank you everybody who's on the call for sharing your time with us today. I just wanted to clue you into a few more things that are coming to you that are going to be offered. Next Monday, the 17th, we'll be having our monthly virtual networking event. And then we're following that with another Connect Ed with, it's the Facts on Fiction and Publishing from Caroline Lee. She's a novelist from the class of '03. That's going to be fantastic. And then we have the Facebook Live, the monthly Facebook Live series that I've been doing, and that's coming up on August 27th, and that will be Bring Your Genius to Work. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Don't forget, this will be recorded for you. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming, for participating. We look forward to seeing you at the rest of our events. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks again. Take care.